This is the very first time we're bringing orbs to the US. It's the first time World ID is available on mainnet. It's the first time for a bunch of things. So we're super, super excited to share this with you. I will give a short intro, then Miguel will give you a full demo of how to integrate World ID into your own apps so that you can play around it for the weekend. Before that, I want to give just a bit of background on why we're doing this and like how we got here in the first place. And so at Worldcoin, we think crypto is really awesome, but it has two problems. First of all, very, very few people have actually tried it. And then all of the value that's being generated by cryptocurrencies around the world and blockchains is being hoarded by a bunch of people like you and I, like early adopters or insiders, and we think that sucks. And so a few years ago, we had this crazy thought of what would have happened if Bitcoin had launched by giving 1 Bitcoin to every person who was alive, right? There's a bunch of really cool things that could have happened. And so we said, what the heck, let's just give it a shot. Let's give a token to everyone in the world and see what happens. And now, in doing this, we ran into a problem that many of you have probably ran into your projects, which is how do you make sure people don't abuse it, right? In our case, it was how do we make sure if you're giving away a free token that people don't double dip, right? That they only claim it once. And so we started looking into it, and it turns out this is a very common problem. This is known as Sybil attacks, and it's basically this idea that online you cannot distinguish whether 20 accounts are 20 different people or one person that has 20 accounts, right? And so we started doing a lot of thinking of how to solve this, and there was 3 basic requirements of how we wanted to solve this. Whatever we did had to respect privacy of people. It also had to be inclusive. We were trying to do something for the world, which meant it had to work in the entire world. And then lastly, it had to be scalable, right? We didn't want to do this experiment on a scale of 10,000 people. We wanted to have 1 billion people try this. So we went through a bunch of things. I'm not going to dive in detail. We have another workshop tomorrow for this. But basically, we thought about email and phone verification. This doesn't work, right? It's super easy to get another one. We thought about KYC, which is verifying official IDs. This is super expensive. Most of the world doesn't actually have an ID or APIs to verify that ID, and it's not very private at all, right? Then we ran into Web of Trust, this idea of people endorsing each other so that you essentially build a model that allows you to like be sure that people are unique. And we actually really like this. The problem with Web of Trust is that you need a very large initial set of users that you can really trust. And so we actually think this is how we are going to scale Worldcoin from 1 billion users to 8 billion people. But you still have the problem of how do you get that first billion people that you can trust to build that Web of Trust so that you're not building a house of cards. And so after a bunch of things, we landed on biometrics. Then for a bunch of reasons that I'm also not going to get into, we went through faces and fingerprints. We landed on we have to use irises. And then when you decide that you want to do, okay, biometrics and irises, your first thing that you say is, okay, let me use Face ID or let me use my iPhone. But it turns out that phone sensors just don't have enough resolution to distinguish between 1 in 10 billion people, right? And they also cannot operate in untrusted environments. Then we said, okay, let's look at something like Clear, right? Or like off-the-shelf iris scanners. And this has the same problem, right? And the reason for this is all of these devices do one-to-one comparisons, right? You're saying, hey, I'm Tiago Sada, and so compare me to the previous biometrics of Tiago Sada, right? And so that is fairly easy to do. We have a different problem, which is, hey, I'm a person that has never done something before, which means we have to compare your biometrics with everyone else who has come before you. And so something like Face ID can only distinguish between 1 in 10 million people, which means that after 5 million people, there's a 50% chance that when you try it, it tells you, no, you've already done this, even if you haven't. And so for what we were building, we wanted to be able to distinguish between 1 billion people. And so we just realized we have to build custom hardware. There's nothing that does this. And it's like, shit, now do we do it or not? And so we did do it. We spent 2 years doing R&D. There's been about 5 generations of the Orb hardware, and this little beauty came out, right? Now, I'm going to leave you in suspense here because we have a full workshop tomorrow for 45 minutes. We'll actually go more in depth into why we built the Orb and how exactly it works. We will go piece by piece of the hardware. We're going to get very nitty-gritty. It's really cool engineering. And so that's tomorrow here at 4 p.m. But in general, the Orb does 3 things, right? First of all, it looks at your face and makes sure that you're real, that you're not trying to cheat. So it does with a bunch of sensors, IR. It creates a 3D mapping of your face, makes sure that you're not wearing prosthetics, things like that. Secondly, it generates a code from your iris, and that code leaves the device and is compared against every other code that has ever been successfully verified. And if it's unique, the orb then triggers a verification. It basically approves some private keys on your phone that we call World ID. They're completely separate from your wallet, completely separate from your biometrics, and it marks that as verified. Right? And so again, we will talk about this tomorrow. And so we really like this because it means we don't need to take pictures of you in the app. We don't need selfies. We don't need your name. We don't need your contact info. We don't need to do KYC. But biometrics is like pretty sensitive, and so we wanted even more privacy. And so then we heard about this really cool new technology called zero knowledge proofs. There is a blog post on our website if you search privacy preserving proof of personhood protocol, where it's the PPPOPP, where you can see how exactly this works. But basically we married the biometrics that we were already doing on device with zero knowledge proofs to make this really, really private system that really nothing out there has today. And like I said, the breakdown of this is like pretty complex, but it's on our website. It's a really, really cool system. And so with that in hand, we actually went out to the world. We started trying this out, trying to give people the WorldCoin token and signing up, giving them the World ID. And we've been to 25 countries or something more than this around the world, everything from Norway to Mexico, where I'm from, to Chile and Kenya and Indonesia and India and Portugal. We've had very few orbs because up until now we had to make orbs in a lab, and so we only had 25, and we would like shift them around. Right now, we are finally producing orbs in a factory. Just last month we made 250 orbs, and then now we're going to be making a couple hundred orbs every month, which is insane because with just 25, we actually signed up over 600,000 people in less than a year. And so now with hundreds of orbs and thousands of orbs very soon, the scale of this is going to get pretty ridiculous. And so all of this was great. We recently announced we're open sourcing all of this. Part of this is already open source. Part of this we're in the process. And we started seeding the community. We now have a Discord. We're starting to build in public. We're setting really the foundations for decentralization. There's some parts of WorldCoin that will be decentralized before others. Obviously, we do hardware. But the end goal is to have everything decentralized. But there was one question we kept getting from people like you, which is, all of your project is like pretty cute, but like how can I reuse your verification on my project, right? Because I don't really care about your token. I don't really care about whatever fluffy thing you want to do, but like I want to issue loans or I want to do another airdrop, and you've already solved civil resistance. You know? And honestly, for a while, we resisted doing this because of privacy. Like we know how we treat privacy. We know we use CKPs and all these things, and it just makes us very nervous to share this SDK with other people. But eventually, like, it's just a fact that you can build really cool stuff if you can prevent civil attacks. And so let's say, okay, let's actually do some thinking. And so about 3 months ago, we said, okay, how can we open up an SDK for people to start playing with this? And with one condition of preserving privacy at all costs. And so for us, that meant a couple of things. A lot of times people asked us, hey, can you just issue like a social security number that's like your crypto SSN, and you can just like, people have one of those, right? And we don't want to do that. We don't like the idea of people being able to track you across crypto. Another suggestion that we got is, well, can you just like whitelist a wallet, right? Can you tell me like which wallets have been seen by an orb, and I can just like query that? And again, we don't like that. We like the idea of people being able to use many identities, be pseudonymous, and we think that humanity should be separate from your identities, right? And so the solution was actually really obvious. It's just use the same zero knowledge proofs that we use on our own, right? And so with these, we created something called World ID. What you're going to see today is the alpha version of that. We're super, super excited to share it with you. And this is very simple. It's a protocol that allows you to anonymously verify that someone is a real person and is performing an action only once, right? So for example, for WorldCoin, people prove us with a zero knowledge proof, like, hey, I'm a real person and I've never claimed WorldCoin before. Now with the SDK, with World ID, going forward, developers can create any other actions, right? And so let's say that you're an artist that you want to do an NFT that each person can claim only once for free. Now that artist can verify, hey, like this person is a real human and they've never claimed this NFT before. The actions can be anything that is on chain, anything that can be triggered by a web API. It's very, very cool stuff. Now, while all of the things behind it are super complex, we actually wanted to make it both really easy for developers and for users. And so for developers, all you need to do is add like 2 lines of code. And for users, and starting today, there's a very nice developer portal that actually walks you through the process of implementing these, choosing whether you're doing something on-chain or you're triggering something with an API, and how to integrate the widget and all of these things. And you can manage different actions. So as, for example, us as WorldCoin, we have a bunch of different actions that people prove in the app that they are unique and that they haven't done before, and so you can manage all of those things. And then for users, what this looks like is very similar to a CAPTCHA. It's like a CAPTCHA that when you click it, it either takes you to the app if you're on mobile, or it shows you a QR code that allows you to generate that zero knowledge proof. And so this is what it looks like. Let's say that someone wants to do an airdrop, and they, instead of having just a claim button, they would now have like this CAPTCHA thingy there. And you can customize the style. People will click on it, and they can get a QR code. They scan it with the WorldCoin app. The WorldCoin app asks them like, hey, this developer wants to verify that you haven't done this before, in this case, receiving an initial airdrop. So you verify that, we submit the CKP, and then that CAPTCHA, that button is enabled, right? And so rather than telling you more about this, I will just let Miguel show you how this works live, and then I'll be back in a bit.
Oops. Did I fuck anything up? There we go. Okay. So, as Tiago said, we've made this really amazing protocol, and we trailed that a little bit on the last ETH Global Hackathon, Hack Money, which was an online hackathon, and we got a lot of really feedback from developers about how it was great, but there were a bunch of things that could be improved about understanding how it works, make it easier to people to get started. And so since then, we just like went and did exactly that. We have this developer documentation with all of the introductions, and now, instead of having to install 5 different things to get started, we have this really cool dev portal. So, for example, we have a bunch of examples here, but let's say that I just want to create a new action, and I'm going to say just like testing. Anyways. And this is going to be for staging. One of the really cool things that we've implemented is, instead of just like rolling your own smart contracts and that's it, and that's all you have to do, we have a cloud version now, where all of the proofs are still verified on chain, but we just provide you an API, so you can implement your front end, you can get all of the details from the widget, and then you just send that to our API. We take care of verification, we take care of everything. And we even have like a kiosk mode that I will demo in a second, that is the easiest way to do Wall ID in any way, where we just have a page, shows the QR code, people scan it, it verifies people, and that's it. You just like, I don't know, if you're in person, give them some socks, or you give them something. You can also redirect to a URL. So for all of the Web2 people, or all the people that don't really want to get into smart contracts right now, this is great. But what we're really here for, I think, is on-chain. I'm verifying all of these things on-chain, and so, oh well. So we've made also this simulator while the connection comes back, which allows you to test all of these. The issue with proof of personhood is that it's really freaking hard to test, because you try it once, and then you cannot try it again if it works properly. And so this acts kind of like a faucet or a temporary testnet, where instead of going to an order every time and having to just like hunt for humans around the conference to try your thing, you can just add entities to a test network and then deploy your smart contracts to a testnet and verify with this. So this was a small pause, and this would be kind of like going through an orb. And it's now verified. I will go back to where I was before. So as we mentioned, we have the API and JavaScript widget. First, you have to integrate the JavaScript widget. This works both on-chain and with the API. You just add an npm package, throw in a div anywhere where you want the CAPTCHA to appear, and then call wallid.init with the ID and an action ID that you get from the portal. Then you call enable, and that will get you the result. Afterwards, you can either verify the proof with the API, or you can send it to the smart contract, which will take care of verifying. So how that looks like is, here I have the code for this app that Tiago showed, the whole airdrop example, where you just connect your wallet. I'm going to pull in my Rainbow wallet here to connect. And this would be which wallet receives the airdrop. The really cool thing about proof of personhood is that I can just like receive the airdrop with a different wallet each time, or maybe with even different identities, and no one will be able to track me between those usages. Or even if I use the same identity all the time, since everything is like self-contained, Wallet leaks no information about you, not even that you were the same person that did these 3 things. So then afterwards, it shows up I'm doing this once check. I would scan this QR code with my phone for demonstration purposes, and because again, proof of personhood testing is really hard, I can just copy this QR code and paste it on the simulator that I mentioned before, paste it here. That will show me the same prompt that would show up in the app, and I can just click verify, and then when I go back, verification confirmed. And then I would just like click claim, which should pop up a transaction in my wallet to actually submit the transaction. Behind the scenes, what is happening is we're just generating the proof, so that it's just like in React, we have a hook, we run the widget, we set the proof to a variable here. We have enough examples and code, and all of the code that I'm showing is open source, so you'll be able to copy and paste this if you want to. And then afterwards, you just call the contract that you want. In this case, we have called it day contract with the parameters that you want to pass. For example, the wallet address that will receive the airdrop, and then these 3 items from the wallet proof that you can just drop in there, and the contract will take care of verifying everything. How that looks is you first have to check that the user hasn't done it before. You just have a mapping for nullifier hashes on the contract that is just like a number to a Boolean. You then call the verify proof function on our contract, passing both the parameters that the user provided to make sure that someone cannot like intercept this transaction and inject their own wallet to receive the tokens, and then also the action ID that you get from the dashboard. If the proof isn't successful because the user has not been verified, because they have already done this, or for any other options, this will revert. Otherwise, this goes through, we mark the user as done, and we can do literally anything that we want. And this example, this code we're doing here, is for a project that we made for this hackathon called Pet Orbs, where you can adopt one of the little plushies that we made. One of these guys. Are kind of like the kids for the orb, a little bit less threatening. And you just would go in, connect your wallet, you can switch to Polygon, you get to name the orb, and then again, you say, I'm doing this once. And in this case, since this is in production, I'm going to grab my Worldcoin app and scan this app, and it will show me the same UI that we saw before, with this project wants to verify, although a little bit slower, because Wi-Fi. And then the key here is I have already verified here, because I already have my Pet Orb at home. So what's going to happen if it loads, otherwise we can just all pretend it did, is it will actually succeed here. We're still working on ways to verify, show feedback to user before they submit the transaction. That would probably come up in the next release, hopefully. But when I click the adopt button, which shows up after this, it would throw an error because the transaction reverts because the proof has not been verified. I'm going to try this one last time, and otherwise we'll just like move on. In the meantime, as I mentioned, we have this this documentation. It goes really in depth into like all of the different options that the Worldcoin widgets has, how to specify a signal, which is a way of encoding all of these parameters to make sure that no one intercepts the transaction. Also, how to use this with non-crypto projects. We've made a bunch of demos. For example, we have a Discord bot that can verify that you are a unique human that has never joined a server before and give you a special role so you can see some channels. The roadmap, how to do more custom integrations. And we also have a bunch of examples, like the airdrop that I described, the Discord bot. The code is also here. Hyperdrop, which is a project where you would send contracts to tokens to a smart contract that then splits them between all humans on Earth, which is really cool. And hopefully, whatever you guys build on the hackathon, you can just like PR to show also here for other people. We also have the API, again, for more Web2 things. And it doesn't seem like this is going to want to load. Again, I blame the Wi-Fi. Yeah, that's pretty much everything that we've made. We have this dev portal. We have the simulator, we have the docs. It's really easy to create all of the actions here. You can also customize them and even like verify them, so the application shows a fancy logo and a check to make sure that no one is pretending to be you. And yeah, hope that you really enjoy building with this.
All right, amazing. So just to, all this loads, just to emphasize what Miguel said, is we're super excited about what the developer portal enables and how it can make the development experience a lot easier. The example that you saw today is if you want to execute an action on chain, right? If you want World ID to trigger something on chain. Now, we've gotten a lot of requests and we've actually even used it ourselves for the Discord, but hey, like maybe I'm a crypto project, but for whatever reason, I just need an API call on a web server, and that's fine, right? That's what cloud actions are for. Everything is still verified on chain. We just handle all of that complexity for you. So no need to be deploying smart contracts or things like that. So that is the World ID flow. Basically, a World ID visits an orb just like this one to get their World ID. You as a developer can integrate the World ID widget or one of the other options that we have for World ID through the developer portal. Then the user interacts with that. They have to approve the verification through the app that generates a zero-knowledge proof. It submits it, and then you as a developer execute whatever action you're trying to do. So this is super flexible. As you can imagine, we've seen people do projects for like polls for this, for voting, whether it's one person, one vote, or quadratic voting, or conviction voting. There's a bunch of fundraising examples and soulbound tokens, and there's a bunch of things you can build with this, and you probably have better ideas than us. Starting today, for the first time on Polygon, you can actually use this for real. In the past, when we shared a sneak peek of this, you could only use the simulator, and no real people could use this. There was no developer portal, no cloud actions. And so starting today, all of this stuff is live on Polygon. The on-chain actions only work on Polygon. The web actions, you don't really care about. Like, we will verify the actions for you on Polygon, but for you, it doesn't really matter. Your app can be wherever you want it. And if you see an orb around the conference, you can actually download the app yourself, get your World ID, and you can test things yourself. So before wrapping up, we want to give a huge shout out to a bunch of open source projects that we are building this on top of. Mainly Semaphore. All of the zero knowledge proof that you see is an open source project called Semaphore. Super, super cool. The Worldcoin airdrop, which is not available in the US, but we still work a lot with this team, is a team called Hubble. It's an L2 that came out of the Ethereum Foundation. It's an optimistic rollup, so we're huge fans of them. And lastly, Wallet Connect. You might not have realized, but the way World ID works is actually the connection between the wallet, the user's app, and your widget. It's actually happening with Wallet Connect, even if it has nothing to do with your wallet. We just use all of their WebSockets and things like that. So we're super, super grateful for that. If you have any questions, we are on Discord, both on the official hackathon one and on the Worldcoin Discord. We can just chat one-on-one, or you can just look for us. And so just to summarize, World ID is a new protocol. It allows you to build serial assistance into your app within 10 minutes. It's super private, it's self-custodial, which we're very excited about, and it's open source already today. And more than anything, it's very flexible, right? You can use it basically for anything you can imagine. With that, again, you can get your World ID today. We were having some Wi-Fi issues at the booth, so you might see us walking around randomly with the orbs. Just stop us, or if you see us like somewhere, just say like, hey, I want my World ID. For example, Hag here has a World ID, an orb, and we can help you set it up in like 2 minutes. We do have a track on the hackathon with a bunch of prizes. I'm sure you'll already look at them, so I won't go over them. There's first place, second, third place, and also a pool prize. And in general, we are some Alpha League here. We are about to launch a grants program. So anyone that's hacking on these will probably be fast-tracked on those community grants that we will launch during the summer. Last two things. If you are curious about the orb, why we made the orb, you hate the orb, you love the orb, you have a weird attraction to the orb, tomorrow is the day for you. We're going to, for 45 minutes, dive super in depth into everything orb related here in this building in some room at 4 p.m. And then also, if you really like what we're doing, we're hiring across the board, whether it's for product design, a bunch of engineering, like pretty much if you can imagine it, we're hiring for it. And so please come and talk to someone in the team, or just email me directly at tiago@worldcoin.org. So with that, I want to leave the last minutes that we have for questions, mostly for Miguel, but also for myself. Yeah. Yeah. Miguel. Yeah. 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 So it's, first of all, it's not really an identity protocol, right? Because everyone gets the same proof of personhood. You cannot, it actually is not very useful for some things where you would want to distinguish people. What we give you is a way of knowing that someone is a person that hasn't done something before. So in terms of a downside, that is a downside, right? If you do KYC, you don't just know that they're real, you also know who they are, right? So that is a downside of these. There's obviously, we have to get everyone on the system, right? And so we have to find a way to scale this to the world. We think we have a path to that. And there is one trusted component here, which is the orb, right? The orb is essentially a real-world oracle, and we do a lot of work both to prevent abuse and to react to abuse. So for example, every orb signs each verification. So if an orb was misused or it was compromised, us right now and in the future, the community can actually retroactively expire the verifications from that orb and just tell people that they should return to another orb. So there's things that we do to mitigate that, but there is inherent trust in the orb, and that is just perhaps the downside of the project. But we think it's by far the best path, obviously. Yeah, so we're not really talking about the WorldCoin airdrop today. You can throw questions on the Discord on that. In summary, there's just not enough regulatory certainty in the US for us to feel comfortable running the WorldCoin airdrop in the US. Yes, so right now in other countries, people can try the beta. So we're issuing what we call beta tokens, which is world tokens on a testnet that will hopefully convert. I would rather not talk about the airdrop. Let's focus on World ID today. Yes, let's focus on World ID today. Sorry, yeah. No. I'm happy to respond on Discord. It's just right now we're not talking about the airdrop in the US. So, yeah.
That's not going to last for very long.
For now, we're not talking about the airdrop in the US. Yes. Yeah, great question. So we're actually hoping to open up the hardware of the orb before this conference. The spirit of the workshop that we're doing tomorrow is that it's pretty much sharing everything that we would share anyways. We are ready to do so. The special consideration with the hardware is the licensing. It's a double-edged sword opening it up, right? Because people could choose to misuse technology that we've developed. And so all of the blueprints and everything will be opened up. We are working with really, really cool open source advocates on exactly what license we will do this with. And so during the summer, the hardware of the orb will be open sourced. And then hopefully within a year, the firmware will also be open source as well. No worries. Yep. Yeah. Good question. Do you want to take this?
Can you repeat that, sorry?
Do we use this? I can just take it.
Yep.
So no, you do not use this in place of a wallet. When you download the WorldCoin app, you get a self-custodial wallet on Ethereum. Right now it supports Hubble on Ethereum and Polygon. World ID is completely separate, it's wallet agnostic. And so when you sign up to WorldCoin, you do get a wallet. You can use that, or you can just use any other wallet you want and just use World ID through the WorldCoin app. Okay. Yeah.
What if I lose my gun? Or what if someone steals my gun?
Yeah, great question. So, unlike your World ID private keys, you can back up just as you can back up a wallet private keys. So right now we support cloud backup. In the near future, we'll support social recovery as well. The additional thing that we can do in this case is we can also let you go back to an orb, expire or revoke your old World ID and get a fresh one with that same iris code. Because while there is not a link between your wallet and your iris code, and there's also not a link between other stuff that you do and your iris code, there is a link between your World ID public key and your iris code. So we can revoke that verification that is on that World ID public key and assign a new one, right? And that's fine because the actions that you do with World ID are not tied to your World ID public key. This is the very cool thing. You cannot query some World ID public key and ask like, what has this person done? Is every action is completely unrelated to each other, unlike it would be in the case of wallets.
You lost your eyes? Yeah.
Yeah, so if you lost your eyes or if you don't have eyes, then in the short term, we don't have a mechanism yet. This is what I was talking about. The way we see scaling this is actually through something like a web of trust. But in the short term, the vast majority of the population has 2 eyes. The vast majority of the population don't lose their eyes, fortunately. And so we think that's good enough to issue it. You would only need to return to an orb if you lose access to your World ID in the first place. So even if for whatever reason you have an accident, as long as you don't lose access to your World ID and you have it backed up, you should be fine. Anyone else have a question? All right, then let's take one last one from you.
What's to prevent me from building like a spoof orb? It doesn't have like a secure enclave that assigns a transaction.
Yes, so we'll talk about this tomorrow. The orb has a secure enclave. Each orb is provisioned its own signature. That's what it uses to sign the verifications. And so there is a whole flow around that. You can imagine very similar to how you provision hardware wallets. And so, yeah, that's in short the answer. We'll talk a lot about more of that tomorrow. All right, sounds good. Thank you so much, everyone. We will be around all weekend long. We will also stick around here in the back if you have any questions or if you want to ask one-on-one stuff. Super happy to see you and happy hacking. See you.